Have it.
Right. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Boxing, Weights and Rugby YouTube channel. And I'm here, as always, with my good friends Enda and Luke to discuss the month in boxing that was October. How are we doing, gents?
Boxing friend.
Here we go.
Also rugby friend.
That's it, yeah.
We mentioned the rugby to a Scotsman or an Irishman, actually.
We're not talking about the rugby. It's
No.
I think I very, very briefly about the rugby as I text Enda when Glasgow beat Leinster, saying that it was a long con so that we could win that game, and then Glasgow I think promptly got beat off Connacht like the next week. So it was my long con didn't last very well. But there is only one place to start, and it's in Saudi Arabia, because we might as well get this out of the way. So it's the bet I at least want to talk about, and it's probably the most important bet. And it's the reason most people are watching. So Tyson Fury versus Francis Ngannou. I did not get asked about this once the entire week in the build-up to the fight, and my God, did I have to answer a load of questions. Nope, I think we just blipped.
I think the Saudis are attacking your internet.
Yes, they weren't a fan of that.
For me, it says scheduled. Are we definitely live?
Yep.
Live 122 now.
Yes, that's the one.
Cool.
So we are officially going. So yes. Oh, and we've got Stephen in the house. I hope you're doing well, my friend. But yes, what did we think of Fury and Francis Ngannou, gents?
Right, I'll go first because it's the easiest. Because I'll tell you how much of it I saw. I was avoiding this like the plague. I didn't want any hand actor part in it, and I was like, nope, I'm just going to not acknowledge it as a boxing contest. Now there was a semi-decent undercard in it, but I ended up because I think there was something on. Was the rugby on before that or something?
World Cup final.
Oh, the World Cup final, yeah. So therefore I wasn't watching any of the undercard. And then the final came on, but I just went to bed. But obviously bed and Twitter all night, and all of a sudden it was like Fury's got knocked down, and I was like, yay. But also boo, because I knew what was going to happen. This is going to be the battle between MMA and boxing. And, had Ngannou won, it would be like, MMA rules supreme, blah, blah, blah. Or big guy beat your big guy. So I watched the last few rounds, and I thought Fury looked very disappointing. He was very dispirited. He didn't show any effort. He didn't show any desire to win. Even move out of the fucking way of a punch would have been nice. Ngannou, all credit to him, kept coming forward, and had Fury attacked him, he would have been a sitting duck, but Fury didn't seem to want to do that. But then it played out to finish, which is actually what I had backed. I had backed that Fury would win by unanimous decision, because I thought he would play Ngannou along, and that wasn't the case. Ngannou got to the last round. Well, Fury was shit, but I mean, like he wasn't keeping Ngannou there. Ngannou was there in his own right, and Ngannou was the one making all the pressure, the forward, the momentum. Now it went to points, and because I didn't see it all, I have a rule: if I don't see all the fight, I can't say that robbery or whatever. And there was split opinion on it. But all of the valued opinions I'd have, and one of the most valued would be Lennox Lewis did give it to Fury by, I think it was 2 points, So that must have been, was that 3 rounds then? Because obviously Ngannou had the knockdown. So, whether people said it was close, but they said, no, Fury did win. But, if you gave it to Ngannou, it wasn't a robbery. But that was it. So it was a draw and 2 for Fury, wasn't that correct?
Yeah, I think so. Majority decision.
Yeah.
And I think Stephen echoes your sentiments there, my man. I think he was overly impressed by Fury.
No, he was dreadful. It was really, and it really made me just really dislike Sulman and the WBC even further, how they protect her.
I think it can't have been a particularly difficult stance to get to.
With their golden cows between Charlo and Fury, it's like, oh yeah, no, you can hold on to the belts as long as you want, Why, like, I mean, I presume, well, with Fury, I presume it's something in the background playing, but I don't know about Charlo, whether he's got a pull in behind the scenes. But it just made a mockery of uh, the whole situation regarding belts and titles. And as well as that, had Ngannou got to the decision, it would have been a very bad night for boxing. It was a bad night. It would have been a whole lot worse had Ngannou got to decision. But I don't think he was ever going to get it unless he stopped Fury. But I think it was a poor night for boxing. Boxing really lost on that night to especially an MMA's kind of especially UFC. Their stock rose again, and it's not. We can be all defensive of his boxing as we like. Oh, boxing's still great. It's not. I mean, networks are pulling out left, right, and centre. Shortly, it'll only be available on an app, and that's not a good thing.
Luke, as our regular, I'm going to call it influencer boxing, which I don't necessarily think this was, but we'll call it what it was, which I didn't think it was a serious boxing event. What was your take on the whole thing? Because I know that you were into it the whole way through.
Oh, now he's got cut off.
I said, yeah, the Saudis were like, we're not having this.
Hey, they let me rant.
You know how it is with me. I'll watch it if I'm available to watch it. And again, I watched the whole card live. Yeah, I thought like the card was decent as well. Just want to give props to that. The Saudi money shows what you can do when you invest in your undercard. Because it was quite decent, especially with Wardley versus Adelaide. But with the main event, I do disagree with Lennox Lewis. I think Lennox kind of had to root for boxing on that broadcast. It seemed very forced the way he was saying it. I don't think he really believed what he was saying. I had it 6-4 to Ngannou, plus the knockdown, so I had him by 3 points. I thought, he didn't just look the part. He was the part. I thought at the start of the fight, he did something that nobody expected him to do, which was gauge the distance himself. We all thought, well, I definitely did, that Fury was just going to come out jabbing, put him on the back foot and put him away in 2 or 3 rounds, or play with him, as Enda was saying. But it was the opposite. Francis was able to stand off from Fury. Fury didn't exactly know what to do. And then it was actually Francis's feet that were the quicker, able to close the distance quickly, get out of distance. You could see that Mike Tyson-esque training coming in, especially with the right hand downstairs, rolling out as well, never coming out straight with the chin up, never looking for an opportunity to get hit. He was very defensively responsible, which I was impressed at from him. Because all we'd ever seen, what I'd ever seen from Francis when it came to striking was just wild haymakers. So this was look.
Can I ask you, Luke, there? Because in the last rounds I saw, now maybe obviously he was tired and not able to move as quickly, but I thought he was a bit too stationary for my liking, except for the fact because Fury wasn't throwing, he didn't need to.
From round 8 on, he really tried to put it on Fury and didn't go anywhere. But at the start of the fight, it was the opposite. He was actually
like that. I hadn't seen the start, so
one thing Francis did really nicely as well, which ironically Emmanuel Stewart would have been very proud of, was he had that post with the lead hand. Able to keep Fury back with that post, and Fury wasn't able to bully him. This wasn't Deontay Wilder, who's 60 pounds lighter. This is a guy who's pretty much the same weight as you, but built like a brick shithouse. Fury wasn't able to do anything with him on the inside. No dirty boxing was allowed to happen, although everyone saw that elbow go in from Fury, which was definitely a desperate sign. But the first 2 rounds, were nip and tuck, and Francis, when he let his hands go, he was landing. Fury didn't seem to be able to get his timing right to get out of the way. Nothing Fury landed had any effect. Even the jabs he threw, they weren't like, these jabs, he landed 11 more punches and they were all jabs. They weren't proper jabs. They were like backhand flicks, the ones that Fury does. They're not even scoring shots.
No, you wouldn't score them. I mean, there's no power behind them. But
no, so I don't know how CompuBox scores them, because they don't even land with the knuckle; they land here.
I think once they land, CompuBox scores them, but not as power punches, obviously.
Yeah, but even as a jab, that's not a jab.
No, I know, but like if it lands, I mean,
physical contact, yeah.
Like we're getting into VAR territory now. If you kind of say,
I suppose.
Obviously, once it's not a slap, it's not and wasn't.
And then into round 3, then, Fury, I think Fury tried to put his stamp on things in round 3. He landed a really nice 1-2 down the pipe on Francis, tried it again, and Ngannou was ready, and he countered with that left hook, and he dropped them. Lovely. And Fury was hurt, and if we spoke about this in the group chat, if Ngannou could have got back to his corner, to the neutral corner a bit quicker, which is something that most boxers don't do fast enough, the count would have been finished quicker, and Fury might not have been on as steady legs as he would have been, with 5 seconds extra to get up. So he kind of.
Sorry, look, I shouldn't cut across you. I'm sorry.
No, you're
but the
okay.
only thing is, I would say Fury would have been managed that time, so he would have been allowed it, if you know what I mean. They'd have found a way.
Very,
like,
very possible.
Come to me and all this crack. Give them time,
Well,
So Ngannou was naive, but I still think Fury would have got that. We saw it with the kind of the slower counter.
But so naivety on Ngannou's part, but then he dominated the rest of that round, and I thought he dominated the middle rounds. I found it hard to give Fury anything in the middle rounds, really. I gave Fury round 7 and 8, but then 9 and 10 as well. Ngannou again showed the fitness. He might be built very much, and he might be very muscular, but he's got the cardio. He was able to push the pace in the last few rounds, and like you said, he didn't look too good defensively. He could have been a sitting duck for someone who was more poised. But against that Fury on that night, I thought he looked really good. And, we all talked.
And Fury looked gassed in those late rounds that I saw.
Tired.
So, on to Fury. This is what Stephen has to say. So, is there a chance Fury's best days are gone? Hasn't had a competitive fight in 2 years and doesn't look like he's trained much in that time either. Will it catch up with him? Time for sure. And then he says, I hope that's not the case. As yet, I prefer to see the best Fury versus Usyk. What do we think, gentlemen?
I think.
Sorry, no, Luke, go ahead.
I think with Fury, it's a discussion I actually had with one of my mates with this fight, because everyone was saying about Fury's inactivity coming into this, but they all failed to mention that this was Ngannou's first ever. So he wasn't just inactive; he was brand new to it. And
he also hasn't fought in 2 years.
Yeah, and he's just back from ACL surgery.
But one of them looked like they kept themselves in better shape than the other.
But not even shape. It's boxing shape and in shape are two totally different things. We know this.
But you know what I mean?
But sharpness wise,
that's
did not look like
he
had a 12-week camp behind him.
No, I meant Ngannou kept himself in athletic shape. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'd say he'd done his
breathing
and everything.
His timing was spot on. His footwork was brilliant. At the start of the fight, I'm sure Adam would probably agree with me, his defense was a lot better than anyone expected.
Mm-hmm.
And then he was able to push the pace in the last couple of rounds. It's a case of Ngannou being much better than anyone anticipated, plus Fury being way worse than anyone anticipated.
I think that's probably your best way to kind of explain it. So I didn't watch any of the build up to any of this, and I didn't watch the fight live. I watched Wardley versus Adelaide, as well as the World Cup final, and I had no interest in this until the whole palaver around it, and eventually Luke talked me into watching this. So Francis Ngannou, for someone that's never had a boxing match in his life, for a 37-year-old making his professional debut coming off ACL and 2 years of no fighting. I don't watch the UFC, but by all accounts, he hasn't had a fight in the UFC for ages. I was blown away with. He was genuinely good. Like, the standard of the fight wasn't fantastic, but I don't expect that from a debutant. I don't expect that from a 37-year-old who's never had a fight. The way I would say it is his shape was really, really good, and he kept it when he punched. And what you kind of expect is that, yeah, he can hold his hands there, he can throw a jab, but then suddenly what happens is the shape starts to go. And you saw that towards the end. I think that's what the guys mean, is in the later rounds when he got tired, he still pressed the fight, but the kind of composure and the shape went away. And again, that's what happens. And fair play to him. He went 10 rounds in his debut. That's a ridiculous feat. His power definitely existed. I'm not looking at him going, he's the second coming of, Tyson or anything like that. But what he was really, really good. And he deserves all the props for beyond exceeding any of our expectations.
Mm-hmm.
Fury, on the other hand, looked nothing short of awful. And Ngannou was good. I didn't think even if Fury was shit, Ngannou would be good enough. But Ngannou was good enough to take advantage of that. And then the knockdown's the really good example, which is Fury throws the same combination twice in a row, and you don't do that at the elite level. And what Ngannou does is he comes over the right hand with the hook, and it doesn't make massive. It doesn't hit him on the chin. It just tips him on the top of the head, like the kind of the Wilder left hook did in the first fight. And Fury just kind of crumpled. And I don't think Fury bothered his arse at all for this camp. I would imagine Fury will look a lot better when they do the Usyk fight. But I do think, and I've said this before on this, that Fury's best days are behind him, because he hasn't had a competitive fight in 2 years, and the competitive fights he's had, my God, did he have 2 wars with Wilder. And that takes its toll. That's why we keep saying we don't know what Wilder's got. So we don't know what Wilder's going to look like. We don't know what Fury's going to look like. And it was... Boxing has bigger problems. I think Enda touched on it really, really well. Boxing's biggest problem is the fact that we are herniating networks left, right, and centre. We've lost Showtime. There's rumours of Sky leaving in the UK. That's a much bigger problem than Francis Ngannou putting Tyson Fury on his ass. Like, that's a much bigger problem. But in the silly little world of, MMA and boxing, social media, it is a bit of a black eye for the reputation of it. But realistically, we've got much bigger problems to fry.
But
at
the end of the day, too, it's not like, this whole MMA boxing, my dad's bigger than your dad kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like, that's just nonsense at the end of the day. Boxers could compete in mixed martial arts. Mixed martial artists can compete in boxing. They just wouldn't reach the upper echelons of each other's sport. And
that's it. They're not going to beat the best.
No, and that's as simple as it is.
Ngannou questioned that logic.
But the thing to remember is Holly Holmes. She was incredible. This whole notion that it doesn't go both ways is ridiculous if you're good enough and you have the correct training.
I would say what Ngannou had that Conor McGregor, for example, didn't have was, number one, he wasn't against as skillful a boxer, because Mayweather is beyond the skills of Fury, even his hyped up skills. And Mayweather, obviously, and Conor McGregor had a weight limit where obviously that limit doesn't exist.
See, the thing is with McGregor too, and is
in heavyweight boxing.
This thing is with Conor McGregor, and I don't want to talk about him too much, but he had this mystical left hand, right? This left hand that could put anyone away, and he believed in that when it wasn't really true, and to an extent, Ngannou has that same thing too, but his power is real. We seen that the other night. But the way they're talking, his punch, he's the hardest recorded puncher in history or whatever. But we've seen it now. We've seen the proof is in the pudding. He can't punch like Wilder. He can't punch like George Foreman. He can't punch like Ernie Shavers. Like, he's a big puncher for mixed martial arts, but he's not a big puncher for a boxer.
The simple fact of the matter is, mixed martial artists don't punch in the same way that boxers do, because they can't. Because if you watch any UFC,
it leaves you at a disadvantage.
Of course it is. If you plant your feet, you're liable to takedowns, you're liable to front kicks. So you can't plant your front foot, put your weight over your front foot, turn your knuckles over, because you don't have that. And that's why in the UFC, part of the reason they've got is the much smaller gloves. So if you taught Ngannou, he's clearly got heavy hands. I also think there's a lot to be said for the fact that the heavyweights just aren't as good. Like, if you're at a lighter weight class, the skill level is a much bigger factor, whereas the bigger you get, the physicality is, and he's clearly a freakish athlete, and I think that plays a lot more of a part. Barry Jones says all the time in the boxing news, if you can teach a big man to hold his hands up high and throw a 1-2 decently with a bit of a left hook, he'll be a good heavyweight. And that's exactly what Ngannou was. It's just baffling. It's just mad that he was able to do it against two and on his debut. That's
Before we move on, and to give the kudos to Ngannou, did you think he won, Adam?
I did, yeah. So I scored it exactly the same as you.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't see all of the fight, but what I saw of the fight, Ngannou was winning that.
On the night, I had it 7-3, but that was probably to do with a bit of excitement as well. In what the hell am I watching? But then on the rewatch, I had it 6-4, and I thought
I had it 6-4 with the knockdown.
That seems to be, well, for those that went with Ngannou, that seems to be the consensus.
The only I did know the result, and I don't like scoring fights when I know the result.
That's fair.
I just want to circle back. Oh, look at me being in business word on what Luke said earlier on. It was about that straight jab that Ngannou threw, and it reminded me of Lennox Lewis. Who trained Lennox Lewis? You know what I mean? Do the simple things right, and you're halfway there.
Mm-hmm.
And he did. Like, he was a novice boxer, but he bloody boxed like a clever novice. He did the basic things right.
He thought about everything he did as well.
Yeah, but even like you said, when he copped that Fury was repeating his punches, he knew when to land his and got the knockdown. You know, this is all very boxing 101 stuff. And if people listen, like you were saying about Barry Jones, if people listen, especially at the heavyweight level, because, you know, you don't have to dance around and avoid punches much. You just have to land harder than him. That's it. And it's right. Do the simple things right. And in fairness to Ngannou, he did. Now, the other one thing I want to say is Fury's best days behind him? Yes. He hasn't lived a life of a sports athlete. We all know that, you know, and that will shorten it anyway. But those wars with Wilder, you know, that absolutely. So I think it's too late for Anthony Joshua, but it's not too late for Usyk to take advantage of it. And I think in March or February, I think they've said now.
Hopefully.
My belief in Usyk winning is just grown exponentially from that performance in inverted commas from Fury.
I will say I think Usyk's best days are behind him as well.
They're both past it.
But
they're not finished. They're not
we're
shot.
talking about used batteries.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think Fury could charge it. You know, you couldn't put Fury into a clock now and it would go. Whereas if you put Usyk's battery into a remote, it would even go for another while. You know, I think Fury's further along the road than Usyk.
I would agree with that.
One thing I will say as well is how good a coach is Mike Tyson?
It's impressive. Well, of course he has, because you had D'Amato and Kevin Rooney, and he had some fabulous coaches.
Yeah,
he did really well.
He's the fountain of knowledge when it comes to heavyweight boxing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and he could really do something.
So, only downside for Ngannou is he'll land a fight with Joshua Wilder now, and I'm not sure that goes as well for him. But who knows? Best of luck to him, and he should have got the decision. I'm fine with that. With either of those
think him
fights.
versus Joshua is a 50-50. The way Joshua is.
Yeah, it really is, because if Ngannou lands on Joshua, and we know how hesitant Joshua has become.
That's it. Joshua should, like, on paper, you asked me who wins, Joshua or Ngannou. Joshua should blitz him.
Oh, absolutely, because Joshua's skill level should be enough.
If Ngannou caught him with that check left hook, is AJ getting up and going on his bike? Is
AJ even the will to get back up?
AJ's got a sharper puncher than Fury is, though.
He is.
So you know how we were talking about if Ngannou loses his shape the way he did later in the Fury fight, then AJ. I think that's what I think. Realistically, I think what happens next is if Ngannou decides to fight either of those two, you're probably looking at him getting knocked out.
The worst thing.
I definitely think him versus Wilder would be the most exciting fight, but I would see him getting.
I like the Parker fight. I really do.
I think that's a fight where you lose. I think that's a fight where you lose a lot. Parker should. This is the thing, right? Parker should beat him.
Punch him up. Yeah.
And Parker a big enough name to be fair. I know he's a former world title holder because Joshua got it from him, but is he a big enough name?
I don't see the point in that fight personally, because what do you gain from that fight? And he will probably lose that fight.
So one thing I just want to make about Fury as well, it's a point I made previously. Remember I said if he was 6'2", he'd be nothing.
Yeah.
Yep.
He was against a guy his same size, and he looked like nothing.
Yeah.
Was he not taller than Ngannou?
Well, on paper he's 6'9", and Ngannou 6'4".
No, he did look taller.
There was not 5 inches between them.
Oh no, not 5 inches, but he
maybe
was
2.
Taller.
Maybe 2.
Never believe a blind word that comes out of any of them is.
No, I reckon Fury's probably 6'5.5", 6'6".
What was that, Adam?
So,
But
From what people that are actually around the thing is that
Yeah.
Fury's 6'6".
so the last thing I'll ask you, who would you put Ngannou in with next? Realistically, like.
If we're continuing this deal, then I'm putting him in with Joshua Wilder. You go all in.
And I'm gonna divide that in two and not sit on his fence and go Wilder, because I think that's the fight that would sell, because that would be explosive. That would be
unreal.
That would be the big punches,
It's
you know.
it's
And
like it's gonna be Chisora.
Wilder's more susceptible to getting caught than Joshua, because Joshua's more hesitant. So
Also, he's not fought. Wilder
Yeah.
hasn't had a proper fight since
Yeah.
the Fury one.
Yeah.
So we don't know. So
but I
that's the one to make.
still would back Wilder after being knocked down to get up and knock out Ngannou.
Well, the thing is, Wilder doesn't throw the right hand the second time.
Mm.
If he
Yeah.
lands the first one, you don't get up.
Need it.
Yeah.
But that's what I'm saying. I can see Ngannou catching him, but even if he does, Wilder will knock him down and he
I
won't be
think
getting up.
it's looking like it's going to be Chisora. Because
good
Chisora
Lord.
has those friends over in Skillshare.
Yeah.
He's looking for the fight. It's Africa versus Africa. It's
I am not so sure. Still, like, I mean, the Arabs aren't stupid, and I don't think that if they were offered Wilder or Chisora, I know who they'd pick.
100% if they were offered Wilder, yeah.
But I can't see, like, I mean, every fighter wants it. I mean, Jesus Christ, Eddie Hearn's nearly creaming his pants to get it for one of his, especially Joshua, his cash cow. But Johnny Fisher, Johnny Fisher is there surely another UFC guy at heavyweight that could fight Johnny Fisher?
I'm sure there would be.
But no, I think if he's available, get Wilder. That fight would be explosive.
And I tell you something for nothing as well. This gives me confidence that Zhang beats Fury.
Yeah, I think that's a very fair point. With the physicality and the power.
Or does that mean then Zhang will go on Fury's avoid list?
100%.
Yeah, like the plague. You
Like
never
Joshua's avoid list,
He couldn't bully Zhang. There's not a chance he could bully Zhang.
Yeah.
Zhang is all wrong for Fury because A, Zhang doesn't understand him for Fury to get into his head. B, he's the same size as Fury. And C, he's southpaw. All wrong. All wrong. He'd avoid him like the plague.
I love it when you go full Duke. It doesn't happen often enough.
It's all wrong for you, baby.
All wrong for us, baby. Right, we're moving on. And we're going to move on to, I think we're going to go to Catterall versus Linares. Because I don't think this should take particularly long to kind of get through. But what do we think? Back in, I think it was like mid-October, Liverpool, Catterall beat Linares by kind of unanimous decision around somewhere between 8-4 to 10-2 on the cards, which I thought was a little generous for Linares. But it was just... Right, I'm going to say this, okay? Jack Catterall is a really, really good boxer. I don't particularly enjoy the fights unless there's a serious threat coming across. He is a much more likable version of Billy Joe Saunders in terms of in terms of the style.
Yeah,
that's what I would say. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I had it a shutout.
Yeah,
I scored every round for Jack.
I think I gave Linares 1.
I mean, I'm not being funny with you. If you played round 1 and you played round 12, you've watched the whole fight.
But did we all not know that was what was going to happen?
But that's my complaint.
You know, I mean, this is an Eddie Hearn special, and I called it out every second from the time it was announced. Get an absolutely over the hill former champion and put him in to make your guys' record. Jesus knows all Eddie Hearn seems to go on about is resume. And it's easy plump a resume when you're putting in former champions who are so beyond the beyonds in against the fighter. Like, Linares had effectively retired and he had got enough money for one last dance. And all he had to do was be in the ring and survive for as long as he could, and Eddie would give him the money, and then he could go off and retire. And he'd no interest in getting involved in any fight. He was only there to get paid. So I avoided that fight like the plague, and, you know, I was proven right. I mean, you know, Catterall on points was screaming from miles. So there you go. That's me.
Like, the problem with Jack is he had one job, and that was to look good, but not too good. And the problem is he didn't even look too good. He looked just negative.
Mm.
You know, like, and you look back at one of my favorite small guys who I wish was around today for a newie is Rigondo.
So literally, I was like, I'm going to wait and see how long it takes you to say Rigondo's name.
So the difference is he could break your face, right? He had a punch. He could KO you stiff, right?
Yeah.
Well, we're not down at very low weights. You know, we're welterweight, aren't we here?
140. What was 143?
But I'm on about like really small lads, you know. So, like,
but that's what I mean. Like you know,
I
was much
just
smaller.
wish Rigondo was around today for a newie. That's a super fight for me.
Oh, a newie. Yeah, sorry.
But what I'm trying to say is Jack doesn't have that, right? He's southpaw. He's negative, like Billy Joe a bit, but he doesn't have any flair. He doesn't go up and down the gears at all. Like it's just so one track. He's a one track mind, and that's fine. You want to win. You'd rather win ugly than lose pretty. Do you know? But yeah, every round was the same. I'm sure the highlights you couldn't tell what round it was, Stephen. Do you know?
I think Jack Castrol. One, he was so again. I know Enda's that kind of outlier here, but I thought Jack was super unlucky in the Taylor fight, and that gets him a lot of goodwill.
100%.
I think Jack is going to get himself into the Who Needs Him club very quickly because it's going to be.
About to say.
But I think his goodwill ran out. You know, he didn't.
But not
utilize that.
But not even. He's in a worse position than the Who Needs Him club. He's going to be in the Who Wants to Watch Him club. And that's even worse because nobody's going to be crying for Devin Haney to defend against him if he beats Prograis.
Please no.
Do you know what I mean?
Don't do that to me, man.
Jesus, could you imagine that fight? Oh, good Lord.
20 punches around. But no, seriously, like, who's going to want to see that? So, like, Jack did himself no favors. And, like, I know we laugh and joke about, like, I do watch the influencer cards and stuff. But these lads are selling themselves to the public. Why aren't these world-class boxers doing the same thing? Like, you don't have to say have these sound bites or be in any way like a dickhead outside the ring. He had every opportunity to do it in the ring that night, and he didn't do it.
Ultimately, Jorge Linares, and we were talking about this beforehand, so there was some chatter that they were like, oh, Linares is really good, and he's this, that, and the other. We were talking about how Linares was, I think he was going through the last three fights, and if Jack needed to chin Linares to make a statement there, because if ever there was somebody there that to get chinned, it was Jorge, because he didn't want to be. If things got tough, he was done. He's retired. He was walking away. A beautiful fighter, and we know that he's got like a glass chin, like he's a glass cannon. We know that about Linares, and Jack needed to go out there and go right. Take the first few rounds, make sure that, you know, Linares' beautiful hands, he's waiting for him to slow down because he's getting older, and he needed to get him out there, and he didn't.
Yeah, he needed to step up the gas, and he didn't.
And that was the kind of the whole big thing from there. But to go from one disappointing performance that largely put us off to somebody else who I think we could probably class it as a disappointing performance, but who definitely didn't put anybody off, was this weekend, and Joe Cordina versus Vasquez. Did we watch the fight, gentlemen?
Yeah.
We didn't even though I had trouble because my Fire Stick broke, but I could.
Legal reasons, he's joking.
No. You can legally watch things on a Fire Stick. It's not all illegal, you know.
Oh, it's the DAZN app on his Fire Stick, yes.
Yeah, obviously. Yeah. Was it on DAZN? Yeah, right. Yeah, it was on my.
It was on DAZN, yeah.
I had a subscription on my phone, so it was fine. Okay. Yeah. And it was fine, but Cordina really should have been getting him out of there, you know. I mean, it's funny because Cordina now, I think, believes what Eddie Hearn has been telling him, and because there was the back and forth with Foster today, and he said, well, you don't bring enough money to the table for me. And I'm like going, Joe, you don't bring much to the freaking table either. Like, I think
I'm going to get my charger. 2 seconds, gentlemen. Continue.
No problem. I think, and it was Stephen that said it. It seems like Eddie's just in his ear the whole time now, and all Eddie wants, obviously, is for him to fight Wood or Warrington. It would have been had he beat Wood, but I mean, Jack Catterall is great, and I love him and all that, and it's great he found that power after so long. But he
Sure,
ain't
but
a big seller.
Yeah. Like I think with Cordina, I want to know where that power's gone for one. Because that right hand he hit Ogawa with, he hasn't landed his last 2 fights. Like people.
What was the name of that song? Was it Supreme? One night only. One night only.
Yeah, I mean that right hand, it's gone somewhere. But like with Vasquez, like I listened to a lot of the people in the gyms who'd sparred with him and stuff like that in the lead up. Everyone had given him a lot of praise. You know, Vasquez is no slouch. So I was expecting a competitive fight early, but I thought Joe would pull away, and he never did.
He didn't.
And I don't know, is that a testament to how good Vasquez was, or was it just Joe just couldn't find them extra third, fourth, fifth gear? You know.
So I'm gonna. This is my opinion on this, because I was listening to the Boxing News podcast, and I actually, for once, kind of disagreed with what Andy and Barry had said. It's very rare, but it does happen. So I'm going to put this out there. Number one,
were they backing the Welshman?
Yes.
You see, that's why. That's why I would say impartiality for once went out the window there.
So Barry had some great comments on that episode, but
it's really it's always fun. But two things. Number one, Joe Cordina's power, right? Joe does. I've seen this quite with a few things, and Ben, there'll be some jokes around eggs, etc. on there. Joe punches fast, but he doesn't punch hard.
No.
And the reason the shot with Ogawa did what it did is Ogawa never saw that punch at all. And because Joe delivers it so fast, see, when he gets a knockout, it's going to look unbelievable. But he doesn't actually punch that hard. And it's very similar with Ben. Ben punches very, very fast and very ferociously. And you don't necessarily see it coming. But it's not if you're there, it's not like a Golovkin power where he'll punch through you. And I think that's the thing with Joe, is Joe, he could not for the life of him distract, because the shot he was going for and the one they were looking for, and they talked about it in the commentary, was step down, right hand comes over. But if you look, Vasquez's left hand never left the left side of there. There was no interest in anything else. And with Joe, they were talking about, why doesn't Joe just dance around the ring and box his head off? Because he's clearly got some phenomenal boxing. He's never shown us this. So this is where I disagree. I saw Joe Cordina versus Gavin Gwynn for the British lightweight title.
Yes.
On the Luke Campbell undercard. And it was a brilliant fight. And again, this isn't a criticism of Joe. I think it's just accepting what Joe actually is. He's never been this guy who can dance around the ring like a Lerone Richards from the UK, or the easy example being like a Shakur or a Floyd, who can basically go, right, you stay there, I'm going round here and you can't touch me. He physically can't do it, because he can't keep you off. I don't know if it's because punching power or what, but it's exhausting to do that. And it's why he was very much going between the two. Now, if we go back and talk about Stephen Fulton, one of the things we really liked about Fulton was he can adapt. And he's got this kind of hybrid style where he's got very slick, fast hands, very good fundamentals, which means he's quite comfortable up close. But also, if he chooses to box, he's good enough to do that at the majority of the level. And I think Joe actually comes under that kind of area. Like, he's not the same as Stephen. Like, he's a bit quicker and a bit flashier. But he doesn't have the power or the ability to keep you round the ring the whole time. But he is good enough up close. But he's good enough up close that he's got the technicality, his feet, and he punches lovely in combinations that he'll get your respect. And I think that's very much what Joe actually is he's very good at both of them, but he's marketed as if he is this slick, moving guy, and I've never seen it in Joe, because he can't. He tries, but he just can't maintain the distance, because the guy's just walking down.
I think he's for those reasons. I think he's very much limited to 130 pounds.
Oh yeah, like they said about Joe going up. I was like, going up is not a good thing for Joe, but
he loses a lot of advantages if he does.
Yeah, well, that was like, he was huge. Oh, he was so much bigger. But that's why I think the Navarrete fight is fascinating, because I think Navarrete style-wise is quite an interesting matchup for Joe. I think that's a bad matchup.
I think.
I'm going to say, I mean, like I would put my house on Navarrete for that one.
I think, like we were discussing, Enda, just when Adam went to get his charger, like the Lee Wood situation, it makes sense.
I love that fight.
Look, as a prize fighter, it makes sense, right?
That fight makes all the sense in the world.
Of course, he should want to unify. Of course, he should want to chase greatness. But in 20 years' time, when he's retired, if he looks back and says, "Oh fuck, I should have fought Lee Wood and got 10 million instead of getting."
I don't think you get 10 million for fighting.
No, but I'm like hyperbole.
A number, yeah.
All right, sorry.
Instead of getting $500,000 to box Shaki Foster, do you know, that kind of way?
Yeah. So here's the thing, right? If Joe fights Wood next, so I love that fight because I really like Joe and I love Lee Wood. I'm a big fan of both of them because I don't need them to be perfect. I need them to be entertaining, and I love watching Joe and I love watching Lee.
Well, that's the point of them. Neither of them are perfect, but they both are, very entertaining. And
I'd much rather that in my fighters than say what Jack or Lerone, who are just fabulous boxers, but I can't watch. Lee Wood, coming off everything he steps up. It's at the Nottingham Forest ground. If Joe Cordina takes that fight, he gets paid a decent amount. That is a very high-profile fight in terms of relatively domestically. And that's a fight I would expect Cordina to win.
100%.
Because ultimately, what I expect is Cordina is a bit better than Conlon, and Conlon nearly had him out of there.
I think Cordina has proved himself to be more than just a bit better than Conlon.
But do you know what I mean? In terms of like, he's got for Lee's a brilliant boxer, and Lee definitely punches harder. But he's there to be hit, and he's there to be hit quite cleanly. And if you're there to be hit cleanly by Joe, that's when he's going to get his shots. Now,
exactly.
So if you're then looking at that from Cordina's point of view, what you then do is, we'll not say 10 million, but like say you get $500,000 to fight Cordina at the City Ground. And then you suddenly you get $1 million to unify rather than 400 grand to unify now. And what you've done is you've doubled your earnings and your profile, which means if he loses to say Foster, which I wouldn't like, Foster didn't blow me away against Rocky. Was it Hernandez? Is it Hernandez?
I mean, if you were to pick Navarrete or Foster as an opponent,
you're going for Foster. But that's what I'm saying, and I'd love to, because that's the fight I'd love to go, because I think that would be such a great fight to go see, because they're both touchable. Because Lee Wood can win that fight because he can touch Cordina, and the one thing we've not seen Joe is take a punch yet. Like Azagawa never got near him, and then neither Rakhimov or Vasquez are punchers. And so I think that fight makes all the sense in the world. It's one I'd make to then attend.
The only issue, or the only issue I would see coming up with that fight is, would it sell the City Ground? Whereas I think Wood Warrington too would.
Maybe. I think it's
with no belt on the line. I think Wood Warrington too would sell out the City Ground ahead of Cordina would.
I think that's a fair comment. But Cordina's not exactly lacking in fans. We know Michael would be there. Back in his boy. And to be fair, Cordina sold out the Cardiff Arena, which I think is 4,000 or 5,000.
Yeah, it is. But like, I mean, it's a big jump from that to the City Ground.
How many people would travel?
Yeah, I reckon.
Because even when we were talking about fights for Cordina in a stadium, we were talking about the old Cardiff Arms Park, or obviously the Cardiff City Stadium. Nobody was ever mentioning the Principality, because that's, well, no fighter outside of heavyweight's really going to fill that, unless they're Ricky Hatton, and there's no Ricky Hatton now in British boxing.
It goes back to the position that British boxing in itself is shrinking again, and it expanded a ridiculous deal, and I think we need to appreciate that it's that, and it's now compressing again. But I do agree with you. I think Warrington has more chance of selling that out than they are. But ultimately, it's not necessarily they need to sell the whole thing out. That fight's happening. He's fighting at the City Ground next. It's in his contract. And if they're not going to do the Warrington fight next, I don't think they are. I think they're going to do the Cordina fight. And I think that's the one that makes sense. And it's one
don't forget, if Lee Wood sells 15,000 tickets, that's still a good gate.
Yeah, 15. Say Lee Wood brings in half the City Ground. If Cordina then brings in We'll say 5,000 to 7,000, given that his name's risen a little bit. That's still that's 20 odd thousand.
Yeah, but it's still only half full at the City Ground.
Yeah, because I don't think Warrington sold out Ellen Road, did he? Or was it Frampton?
Didn't sell out Goodison.
Yeah, or I don't think did Frampton sell out when he was homecoming?
Well, he was fighting in Windsor Park. It's a much smaller stadium.
Right. Okay.
You know what I mean? Like, and on Nottingham Forest City Ground is a big stadium. That's the point of it. Had it been like a smaller ground, yeah, you could.
Bournemouth.
You know, Bournemouth. There's an example. You know, if Lee Wood's stadium was Bournemouth City Ground, they'd fill it. But not the Forest Ground is a big ass because just the sheer size of it, you know.
And I think, but yeah, that's the fight. That's the fight I want to see next. What about you guys?
I'm not saying no to any of them.
Like, that's the sign that Cordina's done well.
Yeah,
you'd watch him again. That's the difference.
Okay, hand on heart, if I was to pick, and I do not like Josh Warrington, and I do not mind Joe Cordina. I used to like him a lot more, but lately he's turning me off a little bit. But and Wood is just Jesus Christ. Every time he does it, he's just like, yeah, you know, I've gone from being who's he to Jesus Christ, Lee Wood. I love him. You know, I would go support Lee Wood, and if it was against Warrington, it would be more passion involved than if he was fighting Joe Cordina. So I think from a pure money point of view and a pure, you know, sales point of view and a pure even the head-to-head, I think, is more intense between Wood and Cordina, Wood and Warrington than you know, Wood Cordina. Like, what beef is there? There isn't one. Whereas we've got a not dubious decision from the first Wood Warrington fight. Like, the only people that think it's dubious is Warrington and his dad, you know, who he walked over to and trying to give him a count. But so for me, I prefer to see, as much as I don't like him, I'd love to see Lee Wood just knock Josh Warrington out in the City Ground. That for me will be the bigger fight.
And Cordina?
Oh, who should he fight next? Probably the winner of that then, if he'd wait.
Please don't. Right, okay. No waiting. We're not.
But do you know what was funny? And I'm just going to hint on it because he fought last night.
Good champions he could fight.
Yeah.
No, but just wait. Joe Cordina and Jamel Herring were talking before about fighting, you know, about being Jamel Herring's second fight back. His first fight back was last night and he knocked a guy out within a round. It was ridiculous. But so they have been making overtures at each other and they both seem quite happy to fight each other. So that could be an interim fight for Cordina if he wanted.
You
know,
here's the question. Would you have any problem staying up to watch Cordina fight Foster or Navarrete?
No.
Well, I'd stay up and watch Navarrete anyway, so it doesn't matter.
There you go.
Foster, Cordina, of course, it's a unification, but I think we are not, you know, if you're doing a poll, I don't think we count as, you know, we're kind of seen as, but they're going to watch it anyway, you know. Will it attract more general eyes to it? I'm not sure.
What, Foster is box office after the weekend.
Oh, that was brilliant.
Yeah, but is Cordina box office enough for him? I mean, Cordina doesn't think Foster's box office enough, which I think is nonsense. I think that's, like, as Steve was saying, that's all just Eddie in his head. But because Eddie's swerving the two American title holders, and I can see why, because he wants them to fight the people he's got lined up. But I mean, Cordina, Foster, Cordina, Navarrete, either of them I'd happily watch, you know. I think he's a chance against Foster. I don't think he's a chance against Navarrete, but then, you know, that's just me.
Enda loves Navarrete. Absolutely. What about you, Luke?
Let's miss the rain. Well, that's missing, not loving. Oh.
No. Luke, what do you fancy next for Cordina before we go on to the last couple of fights?
Sorry, I missed that.
What do you fancy next for Cordina?
I would like to see the Wood fight as well. But again, I'm not opposed to either of the unifications. Obviously, financially, the Wood fight makes more sense for him, but I'm not looking after his financials. I'd like to see him fight one of the champs, either of them. I think, like O'Shaquie Foster, that was my second time seeing him box there, and he's made a huge fan out of me. You know, he wasn't given a full deck of cards during that fight.
No, he was not.
Many reasons for that, and he still won. You know,
So-
everything was against. Literally, he had no right to win that fight, and he went and he made sure he won that fight. He took it out of everyone's hands but his own.
Absolutely.
And that shows what a warrior he is. And Navarrete, I mean, speaks for himself, and Enda speaks for him. Then if he doesn't speak,
He does all the talking. He doesn't need me cheerleading anymore.
A great champion, you know. So any of those, Cordina's exciting enough. I'll watch him fight. Whoever. And
Guys, here's a curveball. What about Navarrete Foster?
Well, I mean, that would be. I think that you would get the Ring magazine.
That's number 1 versus number 2.
Because it'd be huge in America, and obviously Mexico as well. And Cordina doesn't have a profile in the United States. So
can I just swerve there now that you mentioned Ring magazine, just for a split second?
Yep.
You're going to give out about them, aren't you?
You know the question I'm probably going to ask. What do you make of Bam Sonny?
Bam Sonny. Right. Okay. So sorry, Enda. I'll just quickly. I agree with their decision based on the rules they have. What I think they've done wrong is rank. So I think the problem is the rankings.
I think it is number 1 versus number 2.
Personally. It is number 1 versus 2, but they have hit, for some reason, they have Bam at 4. Right?
Yeah.
Which I think is ridiculous. Because I think certainly if we look at Martinez has no business being up there. He ducked Sonny and he's been terrible. So, and then the other guys fought once a year since 2019, and it was I think it was Tom Gray, the always excellent Tom Gray, made that exact argument. So I think by their own rules, that's the correct decision to make, because you can't be changing that. But they've made a rod for their own back, because it is the 2 best fighters in the division, and they've ranked it badly.
You know what that sounds a lot like? The Liverpool-Tottenham offside decision that went to VAR. Because they've made the wrong decision, they couldn't change it,
Yes.
Exactly. So Ring made the wrong decision with the ranking, but now they have to stick with the correct decision of 1v2, even though the person who's 2 shouldn't be 2, and the person who's 4 should certainly be much higher. So I do agree with you there. It's like the things that are subjective, they've allowed that to be wrong, and the things that are objective, they can't twist that for their own good. So because they've made an error, we all think subjectively, by having Bam too low, far too low, that this is why they can't have their belt on show. And I would say, as Ring magazine is no longer in print publication, they need to be keeping that, out there as the best versus the best.
That belt needs to be on show as much as possible.
Exactly. Because otherwise it becomes like the WC belt, where it's just down to the whims of the owner.
The lineal that people start talking about since Fury brought it up. Because you can't strip a lineal with a drugs ban, and I make that point to that Mr. Lineal belt man on his Twitter, and he never answers the question.
Yeah, no, I'm with Enda on this one. Yes, what do you think?
I think the same as you. It's number 1 and number 2 here. Like, there's no number 4 for Bam Rodriguez.
Yeah,
like that's just insulting. I think he'd stand Martinez on his head, and so would Sonny. Do this is number 1 versus number 2 for me. Whoever you want to put as number 1 or number 2, I don't care. They're both very, very good at what they do.
Yeah, I would actually. Yeah, well, Sonny would be number 1 for me, just because I think the guy's talent is such.
And just to bring it back to Cordina, because I know I brought us away from.
Sorry.
The pound for pound British scene, I have Sonny number 1 on that.
Yeah, I think we actually agree on that.
But
I
it's
think
his weakest piece at the minute.
Cordina is working his way up there, though. He's probably one of our pound for pound, well, UK and Ireland will say,
Yeah.
one of the best on these isles.
Yeah, but I would say that is a damning indictment. Well, no, I'm not because Cordina's on it. No, that's not fair. But because you couldn't make a top 10 and you're getting into pretty thin gruel.
I mean,
you
in
know?
fairness, I'm going to see the number one fighter in the UK in December.
Oh,
Right.
CBS.
Yeah, I'm gonna go see CBS. So that's I'm finally making my return to an actual fight. So we're gonna go down to Bournemouth and see Chris.
Now, CBS, Chris is one of these wonderfully likable fighters, but
He's
he
your
wouldn't be in my top 5 pound for pound in the UK and Ireland. Put it that way. He's obviously going to be 6'10" because he's got a fucking title, you know. But probably not top 5 for me.
he earned that time.
Yeah.
Oh no, he did. But I'm just saying, it's an indictment of how poor the UK and Irish scene is right now. That you've got
Yeah, our talent is great as it should be. But no, I think Cordina is well up there, pound for pound.
I think in all seriousness, I think he's third.
Yeah, that's very fair.
So who got second?
The big twat.
Really?
Sorry.
Yeah, but we've got. Tell me somebody who's got a better win in
Actually,
the UK than the Wilder win.
I'm kind of there going. Yeah, probably. Actually,
We rank our pound for pounds differently. That's probably not a fair.
No, but even still.
Yeah. Well, this is the thing. I know Luke and I do this differently, but for me, I don't think anyone has a better win than the Wilder win and the Klitschko win. Even if it's got, historical. I've got massive historical, and I've got a lot of criticism. I think it's
even though I put Fury in there, I couldn't actually challenge it to say no, it should be. I went, actually, yeah, he probably is.
Yeah, he probably is. Now, speaking of a damning indictment, on to Janibek versus Gualtieri, the middleweight unification. It is the first time I've ever watched a middleweight unification and seen the other guy for the first time. I've never heard of him.
We talk about the UK and Ireland's pound for pound pool being shallow.
Yeah.
My God, middleweight is
dire.
Been.
Yeah. This might be the worst middleweights I've ever been. It's unbelievable.
But that's down to one guy and one guy only, and it's Gennady Golovkin. Everyone just jumped ship and went to different weights. Super middleweight ain't that hot either. Because Canelo just wiped that up pretty quickly because
I don't think Golovkin is as ducked as people say he is.
No,
he fought a load of no names. Like, they didn't duck him. Like, you've only got who have you got?
Canelo, look, the champions did avoid him when they were champions, and Canelo put off that rematch for so fucking long. And I think that Bird woman, she should be shot. I don't know if the season's out yet, but she should be shot for that scorecard.
Right, look, this is. I'll vehemently disagree, and here's my argument. The first duck for Gennady Golovkin was Felix Sturm for the WBA belt. That is why they had a regular belt. The second duck was Sergio Martinez. He ended up having the WBC interim belt, and Martinez fought Cotto instead. The third duck was Miguel Cotto, who fought Canelo Alvarez instead of fighting Gennady Golovkin. Gennady Golovkin was already unified champion. The fourth duck was Canelo Alvarez when Canelo gave up the belt.
100%, I agree with all those. 100% I do. But what I'm saying is the contenders weren't ducking him.
No, the contenders were, but the champions were, and that's what matters.
Champions that duck.
One of which Martinez was what, 36, 37 by the time
he only turned pro at 30.
Yeah,
Martinez turned really late.
No, but the whole point of it is it's champions that duck. Challengers obviously don't because they want a title,
That's what I'm saying. So the pool shouldn't be as shallow as it is, even with those few names. Like, that's what I'm saying. It's awful, and I wouldn't blame Golovkin on it.
No, what I'm saying is he scared people away from the middleweight thing, and they were either low or high, and now it's there. But there's now another person that's going to be ducked like Gennady Golovkin was, and that's Janibek.
Yeah.
And I can see him being avoided for the exact same reason. And I can see that's why middleweight is shallow still, because no, I don't fancy Janibek. I'll go up to super middle because that's going to be so vacant shortly,
The thing is I think Janibek is a legitimately good fighter. Like,
Absolutely.
I think he's very good at what he does. I'm not certain about how varied his work is in terms of its straight punches and then kind of you clean up hook, but that's more than enough for this middleweight. What concerns me most is there is nobody currently there coming through. But we need to recognize that I think he is clearly the number one middleweight in the world. Yeah,
Has to be.
Considering that the other contender, he beat one of the other champions, who has the WB.
Oh, it's your man actually, and
The WBA.
he was still champion, but
I don't think anyone had.
no,
Yeah,
there
and then
was-
obviously Charlo hasn't defended it in 870 something days.
yeah, that was it. Charlo was the guy that.
But there's a WBA. Which one did he unify with? Anyway, basically, I don't think there's anybody else on there. However, let's get into the last fight, which I do think is the next big fight at middleweight, which is Tim Tszyu versus Mendoza. I thought Tim Tszyu has had the best developmental year you could have as he goes, despite the fact that he didn't necessarily get to win the belt. He's now champion, but he's developed brilliantly. I was really impressed with him against Mendoza.
I think, Tszyu, I questioned him coming up. He had that name attached. He had a few
Lara.
lads.
Lara's the WBA champion.
Lara.
Right.
Oh, yeah, sure. He fought Spike O'Sullivan for that. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
That was a nasty one. But yeah, with Tszyu, I kind of questioned it because, he had the last name, he had everything. And then they fed him a few lads who, were thinking, they're over the hill. Why are they giving them to him? Let him fight someone with a pulse. And then he was fighting lads with pulses and beating them too in the same fashion. So
yeah,
it's great to see. And I'm a big fan of Tim Tszyu. I think he's
great to watch.
I love
Great
to see,
to watch.
I'm not funny or anything. Throw him in. If Crawford wants to come up to 154, let's go.
Yeah, that's a great fight.
I think
So
Crawford
Actually, bloody well is, And I don't think Tszyu, sorry, I always pronounce the T and you shouldn't. Tszyu would be a great bloody, wouldn't back down for that whatsoever. He would relish it.
He'd get himself knocked out, but he'd be a great fight.
I don't even know if he'd get knocked out. He mightn't win, but I don't think he'd be knocked out. Might be stopped, but he wouldn't be knocked out.
If Charlo is able to physically come down from 168, which I'm sure he will be, because he didn't look built at 168, that's the fight.
So here's So here's actually, I'm going to run this little one by you, right?
Mm-hmm.
You've seen the kind of, they look like their mandate, the way the WBA is setting up is they're looking to get Ortiz. So we've got Ortiz is going to go January. If he's healthy, he then fights Metcalf and then he fights Madrimov. So you've then got, say Ortiz or Madrimov then fight Tszyu if Crawford doesn't then fight that. You've then got the winner of those two fight. You've then got the star suddenly at 154 steps up that you could put in with a Janibek. Jermell Charlo's got to get some sort of credibility back before he goes anywhere near anybody else. But you do then suddenly have all these guys. Middleweight starts to look a little bit better. But I love the idea of Ortiz versus Tszyu versus Madrimov, or even, like you say, Tszyu versus Crawford if they choose to not.
And what about Tszyu Janibek if we're talking middleweight?
Well, that's what we're saying. Like
that's
what they set up is you then go Tszyu.
Oh, set up for ultimately Janibek, yeah.
But, and then suddenly you've got the star.
I think WBA, they allow a champion to fight a champion no matter what, don't they? You can hop up, fight there above or below.
Oh yeah, I think
if you want.
So it's great. So I think there are, and I think because there's so few good fighters there, they have to fight each other. And I think that we might actually get to see that. And I think Tim Tszyu particularly is the sort of one that is actually going, right, I'll fight here, I'll fight there, because he has a name and he's getting to dictate that. And I think
he's
a huge fan of Tim Tszyu.
Yeah, because there was somebody put out on Twitter, a few weeks ago, whose stock rose the most in 2023, and everybody independently of each other almost said Tim Tszyu.
Yeah.
I mean, if there was a boxer of 2023, obviously Terence Crawford's going to win it, but whose stock rose the most, it was Tim Tszyu.
Yeah.
Even with Terence
Not
Crawford.
Dimitri Bivol.
Poor Bivol. I mean, is it Eddie Hearn? I think it might be, because Eddie Hearn doesn't have any pull in America.
He's Frank's baby, I think. Bivol, Frank Smith.
Yeah, I think he is.
I thought it was.
He wanted. Basically, the problem they've had is number one, they want the Canelo fight. They waited too long for that. But then their mandatory challenger was Buatsi, who didn't want it. And then their second mandatory challenger was Aziz, who then is fighting Buatsi. And then that gets delayed. So he's now not got a mandatory. So they're now going, right, who are we going to fight? And because he's beating Canelo, he's got this massive minimum in his contract, and they can't afford to put him in with nobody.
Let's give Denzel Bentley a lot of credit for fighting Janibek.
Oh,
absolutely.
When Buatsi and Aziz have failed to step up and fight Bivol.
Absolutely.
Oh,
but Janibek is a properly quality fighter, and he's the only one currently in middleweight, I think.
But Bentley earned more.
Eubank could be a quality fighter in middleweight now.
We'll wait and see. I'm still intrigued. So we were talking about, obviously, how he lost the weight cut. I'll be intrigued to see how he looks in the next fight.
That's at 160.
Mm-hmm.
This next fight.
So we're not going to mention it, but this next fight at 160. And I'll be
did you hear Daddy Eubank, whose nephew is calling him his son or something now, but Harlem Eubank is who Chris Eubank senior wants for that fight we won't talk about.
But at the middleweight limit, I mean, Liam Smith is probably still a player.
Mm-hmm.
So wouldn't you love like Virgil Ortiz versus Liam Smith?
Yes, I would love that.
That's a hell of a fight.
Does it work?
Which one, Stephen?
You don't know well now. Stop it.
Harlem's fighting Dalton Smith. That's the fight.
Live on Channel 5. Is Harlem fighting on Dalton Smith?
He's fighting tomorrow. No, he's fighting tomorrow on Saturday.
Yes.
Yeah,
but it's not Dalton Smith.
Yeah, he is fighting on Channel 5.
Dalton Smith. But like Liam versus Ortiz, that is a fight.
That's a proper fight. We just need to see Ortiz healthy.
Is it a bit too late?
Yes. And Liam not 202 pounds.
Yeah, Liam needs to lose a bit of weight first. But shall we call that a pod there, gentlemen?
We should, because Arsenal are playing in the Champions League.
Right, then we'll let you run off and do that. I don't have to worry about that.
I think United are too, but I don't know.
That's not a problem for me. I've got Wednesdays free.
But
Thursdays are very busy though.
And I'll just finish off with saying the state of boxing is pretty good, because look at how much we had to talk about there.
I know, right? I genuinely think the actual
how many of those
are pretty good.
Talk about would make the sports pages. Very few.
At some point, we're going to need to come on and have a pod about the state of boxing. But for now, we'll leave that there.
Okay.
Thank you for joining us, Stephen. Thank you again to Luke and Enda, as always.
That was just Luke throwing grenades in at the end, which is his want.
Right. See you later, guys.
Bye-bye.